Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from the Tiny Menagerie. If you are brand new to Aquaria and have wandered through your average well-stocked fish shop, you will no doubt be amazed by the sheer variety of lovely fish available to the hobby. But all those different fish and the general jargon surrounding them can get a teensy bit confusing. So what does a newbie really need to know about different types of fish? Well, probably the first important aspect of fish keeping is knowing their social needs. This is how many of their kind a species needs to be housed with in order for them to be comfortable. Arguably, most fish like to have other members of their species with them, but there are some fish, much like humans, who are loners. With perhaps the most famous of these being the male betterfish, also known as Siamese fighting fish, who need to be kept singly at all times, but it also goes for most sharks as well, such as red-tailed sharks, red-finned sharks, and also the flying foxes and Siamese algae eaters. These fish are perfectly happy in a group as youngsters, but become very territorial as adults and should always be kept singly in a large tank, and they will claim the entire thing as their territory. If you try to introduce another fish of the same species, or even a vaguely similar species, then expect fights to occur, and the weaker fish will likely be harassed to death if you don't remove it. These fish can be extra confusing to those new to the hobby as well, as, because when they're young they can be housed together, this is of course how you see them in shops. Lots of lovely cute little baby sharks all in a tank together. And bad shops will happily let you buy 6 of them without checking your home tank arrangements, which just leads to problems and then the new hobbyist giving up. And just to point out, shark in freshwater fish is just a common name for anything that is vaguely sharky shaped. It certainly does not mean they are ferocious predators. In fact, quite a lot of them subsist mostly on biofilm and algae. Next up against the loners then is fish who like to be kept in pairs, or sometimes in a small harem. Most common cichlids fall into this category, so rams, apistogrammas, cribensis, angelfish and the like. Like the loners, they will happily live in a group when they are young, but once they reach maturity, they will start to pair off, and it's then that they'll want to form a territory of their own that they can then defend while they're raising fry. Once they establish a territory, they will attack any other members of their own kind, and in all honesty, often any other fish as well, if they happen to get too close. Some of these pairing types, if they don't actually form a pair, can actually stay with the group, such as angels for example. They will still establish a very strong hierarchy within the group, which can involve a lot of squabbling and some jostling for position, and that can over time develop into outright bullying of very weak members. Which is why in most cases, keepers will just keep the pair rather than trying to keep a group. In a very large tank, and if you have smaller pair forming, such as apistogrammas for example, then you can sometimes keep more than one pair. But this is risky, and most keepers again will just keep the one pair to reduce the chances of there being any harassment. Next then we have the social species, those that like to have lots and lots of their own kind around them, usually for security reasons, and these make up the vast majority of fish that you will see in fish shops. For the most part, social species need to be kept with at least 6 members of their own kind, as they tend to need more fish in the area around them for them to feel secure enough to actually be out in the open, and because they tend to have a more complex social structure. So, if you want to get the best from your fish, you'll want to be able to see them displaying all of those natural behaviours. And it does need to be 6 of the same species. So for example, if you're looking to buy Corydoras catfish for example, you need to buy 6 of the same, not 1 stir-by, 1 panda, 2 pepper, that sort of thing. They may look pretty much all the same to us, but they are different species, not just different colours of the same species. If you have any doubt at all, then take a look at the Latin or scientific name of your chosen fish. Different species will have a different name. They might have the same genus, that's the first bit of the Latin name, but they will have a different second part, the specific epithet. Take our cory cats for example. They are both armoured catfish, but one is Hoplosoma panda and one is Hoplosoma stirbai. Same family, different species. And then, just to complicate things a little bit further, there are some fish who look very different but are actually just different colours of the same species. This is especially prevalent in live bearers, so guppies, mollies, platies and the like. These have been extensively bred for different colour variations and different tail shapes, but they are still the same species, and so they can be kept all in one group. Most social fish can also then be divided further into those who shoal and those who school, and these are two different behaviours. Shoaling in fish means that they come together in a group and they will mingle. Lots and lots of fish do this, mostly likely for security reasons, but also for social as well, and for the most part they will move in their own individual way even when they are together in the group. Schooling, on the other hand, in fish is a very specific behaviour where fish will follow each other tightly in a synchronised formation, assumed to be mostly for confusing would-be predators. Schooling is a type of shoaling, but shoaling doesn't necessarily mean schooling. And some fish are dedicated schoolers. These Vietnamese minnows, for example, are pretty much always schooling together, while gourami, on the other hand, will shoal. They'll come together in a group, but they won't school together. Also, when they are relaxed, and especially if they're in a smaller tank, then many schooling fish will start shoaling as they spread out to look for food, so it's not like it's a constant behaviour. But if it is one that you want to see, then you'll need to make sure that you're picking the right types of fish. And then there are many types of fish that you see for sale, regardless of whether they prefer to live alone or with others, that you will see described as community fish. But what exactly is a community fish? Well, these are generally seen as fish that don't actively attack other fish, and broadly speaking, they don't need anything hugely specific in their environment, like very acidic water, for example. So, theoretically, they can be kept easily with other fish species in a mixed community. What that doesn't necessarily mean, though, is that all community fish will get along with each other. Some are very boisterous and they charge about the place, eating everything in sight, while some are very shy and retiring and easily scared into hiding. Both are community fish, but one is going to do just fine in the vast majority of setups, while the other will likely starve to death if the outside world is full of terrifying monsters. So, just because two fish are described as community, it doesn't mean they are compatible with each other. But it does mean that you could keep a community of shy fish and a community of bolder ones, just not in the same tank, and you shouldn't have a problem with predation in either group. The opposite of this then is specialist fish, those who are either very dangerous or will actively hunt other fish down, or they have extremely exacting requirements and will need to be kept in a tank purely for themselves in their own personal little setup. And the next thing to consider about types of fish is where they are actually spending their time. And for the most part, tanks are divided into 3 levels. You've got the substrate level. This is the base, where fish will live on or just above the substrate and tend to feed directly off it, catfish being the most obvious example, but also loaches and some large snails, for example. And then there's the surface level, inhabited by fish that live right up at the very top of the tank and will pluck food from the surface, such as hatchetfish and panchaks. And both of these 2 levels tend to have species in them that are adapted in some way to being able to live in these regions of the tank, such as sensitive barbels for finding food hidden in muck, or a flattened shape that allows an essentially cylindrical fish to hug the surface of the water. And then you have the mid-level, which is pretty much the rest of the tank inhabited by more generalist fish. And for the most part, surface and substrate species will have adaptation that means that they will struggle to feed from other levels in the tank, whereas the mid-level fish can take food from both the water column and from the surface or the substrate. But why does this matter? Well, because you're going to need to adapt how and what you're feeding to match the types of species you're keeping. Floating food for surface feeders, sinking food for substrate feeders, with the expectation that the mid-level feeders will get the food as it sinks. If you're only feeding floating food and that's being taken by the surface and mid-level feeders, then your catfish might be going hungry. Equally, exclusively feeding rapidly sinking pellets starves the surface feeders. Also, in order to maximise the number of fish you can comfortably keep in a given space, you will likely want to have ones that live and feed at different levels in the tank if possible. Partly because variety is interesting, but also because food that sinks to the substrate and then doesn't get eaten will rot in situ and can cause dramatic swings in water parameters that, at best, isn't very healthy for the tank, and at worst can be outright dangerous. And also, just to point out, it doesn't have to be fish that you keep as a cleanup crew on the substrate. Snails and shrimps do a fantastic job of eating uneaten food as well from all levels of the tank. And from there then, once you've decided what type of fish you're looking for, be it a social, schooling, community, substrate dweller, or whatever, you can narrow down to the exact species that would fit your requirements, or at least have a good idea of what you're looking for in your next purchase. Anywho though, I hope you've enjoyed this little video all about different types of fish. Happy fish keeping everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!